Carole, we met, you reminded me once, and indeed many times you made the joke of this, that we discussed Don Juan suddenly, and the fact that I actually was able to complete a quote meant that we've been talking ever since, as you put it. You had an amazingly varied life within the realms of acting, directing, writing, and that's informed very much of what we're really focusing on your poetry. Another side of this has been really the mental health element, because of the people you literally grew up with and the way that you became guardians of people around you with their surreal normality impacting on your life and making what one might say, as the Chair of Survivors Poetry has put it, the diagnosed and undiagnosed world collapsed and in a way extraordinarily, for you at least, normal, and something that you grew up right from the age of 6 or 7 when you went to live there through to your teens, and then much later when you encountered people again. How's that sense of voicing, which has another been an element in your life, worked? How's that come out in the poetry? Because there's a lot of it that creates this cardinal strand running straight through your poetry.
I think it's come out in later years because poetry is something that I've come to a little bit later on in life. But yes, I grew up in a very dysfunctional family with adults many years older than me, who were frequently taken away, not at home, disappeared for weeks and months at a time, and it was only much later I realised that they were mentally ill. And yes, later on in life I had the privilege, and I do say it was a privilege, of actually looking after them from a distance, because they could not support themselves.
You once referred to recently having directed The Changeling, and that's a very interesting experience and something that either was informed by your knowledge or in a sense informed your feeling that you wanted to direct the play.
Well, I think all of us are mad to a greater or lesser degree, and as George Orwell might say, some more mad than others. But as a theatrical experience, it was great fun exploring the many facets of madness. On one occasion I had several psychiatrists in the audience who were quite eager to tell me the symptoms that the actors were portraying. So yes, I felt that was well served there.
Yeah. You also said that The Changeling was possibly informed, I think, by an earlier sense of this is something that you had seen and recognised in the play, and perhaps this is something that might have been, I don't know, but might have been influenced by your early experiences where, as I say, that surreal normality.
Well, I think the idea of what makes people mad, some are born mad, some achieve madness, some have madness thrust upon them, you might misquote, but I think love, sex, lust, drive us to passions which possibly take us over the edge, that was something to be explored, but also the very simple things of life. Somehow when one is ill or not normal, one cannot cope with even the everyday things of life.
About 1 in 4 people are diagnosed or undiagnosed, as it were, with mental illness throughout their lives, and there's been an enormous mad stigma, as it were, literally. Directing things like The Changeling would have informed your knowledge about the way that the madhouses and the work in those were very much a trope and a metaphor throughout English literature, as well as through a range of other literatures. Your sense in your volume of poetry, which, as you say, you come to late, but also, that's a little bit self-deprecating, you wrote poems in the 70s and 80s, parodic and also unusual pieces, so it was always there as a vein, and the Jacobean work, and the Barnes, Peter Barnes's work, also kind of, in a way, belated Jacobean work, because I know really inflected your language, and it comes through. You were interested, and I know you were always working with voice and voicings. There are a lot of voices in your poetry.
Well, coming from an acting and theatre background, it seems not an easy way in, but it seems more comfortable for me to be writing dramatic monologues and actually identifying with the people in the poems, and that seems something that I carry on.
I mean, Hugo Williams is one poet who's famous for becoming part of an acting dynasty, and is a poet from that. So he writes to some extent from the inside, but you are really writing from the inside as a writer, and that's one of the two major strands, this and the mental health of literally the adult
Well,
children.
there is also an element of, because for quite a lot of my time I have been teaching as well as directing, and so my thoughts on the current education system are very well documented in the poems too, and of course you need a sense of humour for that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, in a sense, you're looking at the people who may be suffering from mental health issues with the next generation almost, because this presents itself after education around 17, 18 in many cases, but this is something that you've been very much party to, and I know have commented on very eloquently in a range of poems. I mean, I don't want to sort of make your poem seem too heavy. You've got My Life in Hair, you've got education.
Well, I think a light-hearted look at some serious subjects is all to the good, really, and try not to be too heavy. Yeah.
But there's a wonderful light straight through all your poems, and I really would love to hear a couple of those now, because I think most of all the identification with survivors and survivors of mental distress, and something that we don't talk about, but you were guardians to these, as you said, a privilege to have been working with the people you grew up with, becoming their sole guardians for 10 years in fact, meant that you had, well, a rich and devastating experience, and also the concomitant loneliness that brings and the strains that bring on your own life, but in fact is something you obviously to some extent sailed through. You were doing so many other things. You were directing in Millview, not Millview, but
Mountview.
in Mountview. Very different, a wonderful for audience. So at Millview being the mental health institute around here, Mountview is the great drama college, one of the big 9, and your own theatre company. But all this...
Well, there's always a conflict, no matter what line of work you are in, but in theatre there's always the contrast between life and art, and sometimes one parallels the other. I was appearing in a play many years ago in the Haymarket, which concerned the death by fire of an elderly pensioner. And as I was rehearsing that play, unfortunately, the subject of my poem suffered third-degree burns and died as a result of a fire. So that was an exact example of life and parallel to art.
I know that there have been several of those in your lives, and you've written about them, and the play was called Paper Towers, if I remember rightly.
That's right.
But that would be wonderful to hear that, and a great privilege to hear your thoughts and your poetry, which has been so eloquently wrought out of all the suffering and the art, and indeed the laughter. Thank you very much.
This is a poem written for Mental Health Day this year. It's simply called The Mad Hatter is Not at Home. With chewing lips, his face contorts. My cousin speeds off into a twitching night. For his own good. The family's own good. His all-day sleeps, midnight marathons, shopping sprees for red Rimmel and 4 7-Eleven, half-cooked, half-eaten meals, much too raw. Big little sister pines, puts on the mantle of resident naughty girl, refuses pills, puffs on Rothmans, knows it's only a matter of time before she too is taken away. Away day to Shenley? Fortnight in Knapsbury? Electric shock treatment for a spa. Both return with dead eyes. Children huddled together in a semi-detached world. I love you, he says. Say something else, she says. I love you very much, he says. She smiles, laps up a chocolate eclair. I watch. Remember the love. Enough said.